All right, Algebra 1, we are going to continue factoring. Today we will introduce what is called the bubble method. We will use this to factor polynomials with a leading coefficient that is greater than 1. Today we'll focus on problems where all of our terms are positive. All right, we've got some steps, so you might want to pause the video to write these steps down. The first thing we will do is identify the sum, which comes from our middle coefficient, just like when we did the x method, and the signs that we'll need, meaning should both our signs be positive, both of them negative, or one of each. We're going to list all factor pairs for the leading coefficient, list all factor pairs for the constant. We will check our bubbles to find the correct combination that will give us that sum that we're looking for from step 1. Finally, we'll write the answer. That should say write your answer. I'll edit that. Write your answer as 2 binomials. All right. Let's give it a try. All right, so on example 1, 2x squared plus 11x plus 5. So let's start over here with the sum that we need. So what should we be trying to add up to? That comes from that middle coefficient. So we're trying to find a sum of 11. The signs needed, well, today that'll be easy, but I want to get in this habit of always writing the signs that we need. Today we're going to need both of our signs to be positive. We're trying to multiply to a positive number back here, so our signs need to be the same. We're trying to add up to a positive in the middle, so they both need to be positive. All right, let's work on those factors or bubbles. Now, some people might write their bubbles out side to side, some up and down, but first we need to make our bubbles for the leading coefficient, which is 2. We'll also need to make our bubbles for our constant, which was 5. So the very first number and the very last number, that's what we make bubbles for. Now, on this particular problem, our bubbles are going to be pretty easy. So our factor pair for 2 would be 1 and 2. They go in a bubble together. That's the only bubble we can make for 2. It's just a 1 and a 2. Making a bubble that says 2 and 1 is the same thing. For 5, we make a bubble that has 1 and 5 in it. Again, that's the only bubble that we can make, so we leave it there. Next is when we check our bubbles to find the right combination. So what that means is we're going to connect, for example, the 1 with the 5 and the 2 with the 1. That would mean I would take 1 times 5, and that would give me 5, and I would take 2 times 1, and that would give me 2, and I add those together, I get 7. Is that the sum that I'm looking for? Hopefully you're saying no, the sum we needed was 11. So that's not going to work. I'll erase those lines, so hopefully you weren't writing them too hard with your pencil. So if the 1 isn't going to get multiplied by the 5, it's probably clear the 1's getting multiplied by the 1, and the 2's getting multiplied by the 5. So let's try that. 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 5 is 10. When we add those together, we get that 11 that we're looking for. Here's the tricky part. We found our bubbles. We found which way they're supposed to get matched up. Writing your answer gets a little bit tricky. I said we need 2 binomials, so I'll make my 2 sets of parentheses here. The first bubble tells us the front terms, first front, meaning I will have a 1x in front and a 2x in front. Okay, so the first bubble gives us the front part. The last bubble gives me what should go in the back. However, I have to make sure that I line things up correctly. Some people do this by making a little smiley face. So what I mean by that is there's a big smile on the outside and then a little nose on the inside. So this line that I wrote here that connected my one to the other one in my bubble, that line acts like this big smiley out here. So I'm going to be putting a +1 in the back there. The little line that I made like to write my nose here would be the line that connects the 2 and the 5. So I need to put a +5 here. Or some people just remember that if there's a line connecting them, they cannot be in the same binomial. So my 1s were connected, they're not together. Okay, so this would be my answer here. If I were to double distribute, I would get the original problem. Now we're going to try to take this nice and slow because this is a brand new idea and it can be a little challenging. So just bear with me. We're going to practice another one. All right, the sum that's needed comes from the middle term. So in this case, that would be 19. That's the sum that we're looking for. Again, today our signs that we need will always both be positive since we're focusing on just this one type of problem. For our factor bubbles, our first one will be bubbles for 5. Then over here we'll have bubbles for 12. For 5, that's pretty easy. It's just going to be 1 and 5. That's our only option. For 12, we've got a few different bubbles. We could have 1 and 12. We could have 2 and 6. We could have 3 and 4. So we're going to have to figure out which of these bubbles is going to work out with 1 and 5 in order to get our sum of 19. So I'm going to place the bubbles over here as I'm trying them. So as I try 1 and 12. Well, if I take 1 times 1, I would get 1. If I take 5 times 12, I'm going to get 60. Is that going to add up to 19? Hopefully you're telling me absolutely not. That's not going to work. Take that away. And then we could see, before we totally rule out this bubble, if we swap it, is it going to work? Well, 1 times 12 is 12. 5 times 1 is 5. Again, when I add them, it's not 19. So I know for sure right now that my 112 bubble is not going to work for me. So take all that away. Let's try a different bubble. So you might be able to do a little bit of mental math and kind of reason your way through this. I'm going to suggest that we move on to our 3, 4 bubble. Okay. So if we were to take 1 times 3, we'd get 3. 5 times 4 is 20. That again is not going to add up to 19. So let's see if we rearrange our bubble lines, if that helps us out. So this time I'll take 1 times 4 and 5 times 3. 1 times 4 is 4. 5 times 3 is 15. And this time when I add them, I do get that magic number 19 that I was looking for. So I know that I don't even have to check the 2, 6 bubble. The 3, 4 bubble worked for me. So the only thing that's left to do is to write it in our answer properly. So I make my binomial parentheses. Remember, the first bubble from the leading coefficient tells you what to put in the front of your parentheses. So we need a 1x and a 5x in front. If the smiley face visual helps you, you could use that. Remember, the first and the very last spaces get one big smiley face, and the ones in the little get a little nose. So the 1 had a line drawn to the 4. So that means from 1 I go all the way back here and put a +4. The 5 had a line drawn to the 3. So from my 5, I follow my little nose and I put a +3. And this would be my answer. Okay, pause the video, rewind it, watch it again if you need to. I'm going to move on to example 3. All right, this time we are trying to find a sum of 26. This came from the middle here. Our signs again today are just going to be both positive. So we look at our factors of 5. Again, just 1 and 5. We look at our factors of 24. This is when that yellow factor sheet might come in handy. We know 1 times 24, 2 times 12, 3 times 8, and 4 times 6. Lots of options for 24. Okay, you kind of get to choose where you want to start and go from there. I am not going to start with the 1 and 24. I don't think that's it, so I'm just not going to even try it on this one. Okay, you get to pick. Now, just to make this video a little shorter, I can kind of see ahead to the answer, so that's what I'm going to go with. The goal is that you'll get a little quicker at maybe doing some mental math with these as we go. So I'm going to say that I want to use the 4 and 6 bubble. Now, if you think ahead, if I were to match up the 5 and the 6, if I take 5 times 6, I'm going to get 30. And so I know right away that 5 shouldn't match up with 6. That number's already too big. So I'm going to match the 5 with the 4, the 1 with the 6. 1 times 6 is 6. 5 times 4 is 20. Add those together, it gives me what I wanted, 26. So let's use those bubbles to write our answer. 2 sets of parentheses. Again, the first bubble tells you what to fill in for the front terms, 1x and 5x. Then we know that we need to connect these carefully. So the 1 got connected to the 6, 1x all the way back here, plus 6. The 5 was connected to the 4, so 5x connects inside here to a plus 4. And that would be our final answer. Now, if you don't put the 1 by the x, that's fine. If you just had x plus 4, that would be okay. But you have to make sure that the correct numbers get put in binomials together. And you need to remember to put the x's on your first terms from your first bubble. All right, let's do one more together. Since these take a little longer, we won't go through as many examples, but I do want to do one more. If you want to pause the video and try this one on your own, you can. And I'll be back in just a minute with the solution. All right, so right here I've got all the work except for the final answer. I haven't quite filled in yet. So right now we got a sum of 40. I found that using these bubbles that I've shown here. Okay, if you had to try some of the other bubbles for 100 before you got to the right one, that's fine. This is kind of a guess and check sort of method. So I know my first bubble for 3 gives me what I need to put in the front parentheses. So 1x and 3x. This one's a little bit easier since our bubble numbers are the same. Okay, we want 1 to match up with a 10 and 3 to match up with a 10. So they both just need to be plus 10s. Okay, that makes it a little simpler to fill in the answer this time. Again, if we were to double distribute, we should end up with the original problem. All right, I'll stop the video here. I know it's a little bit longer than usual. Make sure that you fill out your Google form, and we will get back to more notes tomorrow. Email me with questions.